Okay, well, we are recording. Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us tonight. I am Elizabeth Charles. I am one of the advisory board members for the Chinquapin Organic Gardens, and we are so happy to have so many new gardeners tonight, and probably some regular gardeners who just wanted to come and get some more information. So we are recording this, so we're going to be able to put it on the website. We know a few people couldn't join us tonight. So I will ask everyone to please keep yourself muted. We are going to have a Q&A at the end of the session. If you have a question in the meantime, I'm going to monitor the chat. So feel free to use the chat as we go along. And we will take all the questions that we can at the end of the session. So I'm going to turn over our intro to Richard, our board chair, and Ann, our vice chair, to get us kicked off. So thanks everyone for coming.
Thank you, Elizabeth. This is Richard Dorier. I'm the chair of the Chinquapin Garden Advisory Board. I'm at plot T8 in the lower garden. I've been a gardener about four years, and we thank you all for coming to join us, and we appreciate everybody. We all enjoy gardening, and we all like to have new gardeners, and we all learn from each other. And so why don't we'll go around, the board members could each introduce themselves that are on the call, and y'all could go ahead one by one.
Okay, I'm Ann Saul. I'm the vice chair of the advisory.
And say your plot number too.
Oh, I'm sorry, my plot is M5. Tammy? You gotta unmute yourself, girl.
Yeah, I was looking for the button. I'm Tammy Preston Boyd. I'm in Q8. I've been in the garden now for 3 years, but I actually was in the garden many years ago in the 80s. So I came back.
Ed?
Hi, I'm Ed Manchin. I'm not sure how to put my face on the screen. And I'm in H2, and this is my 3rd year gardening.
I forgot to mention that I've been gardening there 17 years, so
Okay.
longer than most. I'm still learning. Julie.
Hi, I'm Julie. I'm in C1, and this is, I think, year 5 for me.
Okay, I see Lori.
Hi, I'm in T1 and I've been gardening for probably 20 years.
Lori's also our secretary and treasurer.
Thank you. I think that was we have 9 board members. That's about 5 of us on the call. We are all here to help. So if you do have questions, a lot of us at the garden quite often, and just feel free to email Ann, or you've seen in some of the in the garden regulations, there are links to our email addresses, and we're glad to help you if you have any issues, concerns, or anything you wish to ask during the season. So we'll go back to you, Ann, to I guess go ahead with the program we have.
Yeah, we have there are 176 plots at Chinquapin. It's one of 3 Alexandria garden communities. The others are quite small, only 30, 35. We're the biggest by far. And these gardens have actually been here for 51 years. It was originally a housing development for workers who worked at the torpedo factory. And in 1980, the city took it back and created a park. Now it doesn't just include where the gardens are, it includes the huge area around there. So it's an ideal community because we're kind of hidden off the main track and kind of back in by the woods and everything, which is a real plus, except for the deer. This year we have 37 new gardeners, and that's about normal. We have a fair amount of turnover, because people realize how much hard work it is, especially if we have a a really hot summer, they get discouraged and they kind of give up. So it's not an unusual number, but we're thankful that every one of the plots this year are rented, and we've seen some amazing work going into those. So there seems to be a huge commitment among gardeners to commit to sticking with it this season, and that's great. And if any of you have any questions at all, and I've received several emails from people wanting to know, what can you do or what can you not do, let me know. Let us know, and we can steer you in the right direction. Everyone who rents a plot receives a copy of the rules, the city's rules and regulations. These are the city rules. They're not ours. We help enforce them, but they set the rules. And they were all sent to you by email. I know it's kind of arduous to read through all that stuff, but please do it. Because if you put something in that's not allowed, it can sometimes be, a problem is trying to remove it. So I really encourage you to do that. The regulations are on the website as well as we sent them all to you. The next thing is, speaking of that, is the monitoring. The community gardeners actually do the monitoring for the city. And the reason we do that is the city does not have the staff to go around and check the gardens to make sure that they're complying with the regulations. So we took this on many years ago. And so we have a group of different groups of gardeners who every 5 times during the season, we go through the gardens and we check them against the regulations. And if we see any gardens that, are in violation, most of the time it's just minor, they need some more weeding, things like that, then we notify the city, and the city sends emails to the gardeners to notify them what they need to correct. I want to mention something about it because we want you to take it seriously when you get this, but don't freak out, okay? It's in some cases, it's kind of a gentle nudge. In some cases, it's more egregious. So take it seriously, but don't worry that you're necessarily the people who lose their plots, and some have, if they pay no attention to them and don't do anything for the entire season. But if you're making an effort and get in there and correct whatever the whatever the citation is, you'll be fine. But please, we do want you to pay attention to that. I've received a number of volunteers who are willing to monitor, and we're signing them up, and then I will let everybody know what dates they're assigned to through the season. It's also, by the way, a good way for you to be able to get credit for your volunteer time. Speaking of volunteering, as you know, you are required, if you did not pay the opt-out fee, you're required to contribute 4 hours of volunteer time throughout the season. There are any number of tasks that you can participate in. Some are group, some are individual, and you received an email recently from me as to what tasks were available right now. I also post this on the kiosk next to the shed, and it's updated throughout the season because sometimes different projects come up. The purpose of the volunteer time is for us to take on the work that used to be done by the city. The city used to come in and mow the common areas. And the city used to cover the abandoned plots, and they used to weed in certain areas. And we took over all that. And we're actually doing a better job than they did, quite frankly. So that's the whole purpose of it. It doesn't mean that, and it covers common areas, which means it doesn't mean the paths between your plots. The paths between your plots are your responsibility and your neighbor's responsibility. It covers the areas on the periphery of all of the gardens. If you have any question about, whether a certain area is covered or not, fine, just let me know. There are certain tasks that are set up by teams, like mowing. and things like that. And we also, I'd send out a link to a report form that you use to report your time. And you really need to do this. Don't let it go until the end of the season. Whenever you do something, fill in the report and send it in so we can keep track of it. And also, don't wait until the end of the season to start on your volunteer time, because you can say, oh well, shoot, I've got months, I've got until November. Next thing you know, it's November and something has come up with respect to your work or whatever, and you all of a sudden you run out of time. If you don't complete your time at the end of the season and you want to renew next season, you will have to pay the opt-out fee, which is basically double your rental fee. So I think a lot of people have learned that. We've already seen early this season, many people signing up to take on tasks, and that's a smart thing to do. 4 hours is not a huge amount of time. So I think that's pretty well it in terms of the volunteer thing, and we can talk about that more later during the question part. So Richard, you want to talk about COVID rules?
Yeah, thank you, Ann. And so we, as you're gathering, we have a partnership basically with the city for this, to have our gardens. The city owns the land and we rent the plots from the city. And then the volunteers are board members who are advisory board and help manage that with the city. And so we've worked out an arrangement that they do some things and we do some things. And that's the way it works. And so that's why we have the volunteer time. So all of us can contribute. And really we get to know each other that way. And we just as much fun in gardening is getting to know the people that are gardening. And gardeners are good people. They are fun to talk to, and we all have something in common to share in terms of what we growing and what we like to eat and et cetera. So it helps us build our community as well. We normally have a spring social outdoors at the picnic shelter right at Chinquapin Park, where we can get together and we actually bring have a food we have that we each bring, a potluck event and we normally have that to start the spring season. And because of the COVID issues, we are unable to actually congregate and do that. So that's why we have in the Zoom session. We didn't have any events last summer. So we decided this year, we would try to get together virtually, which is what the world is doing now. But the COVID is still around, as you all know. And we follow I just wanted to speak about that for just a minute. We follow what the city and the state allow us to do at the park. And as you all know, the restrictions they keep getting better or lessened. Last year, in fact, in Fairfax County, they closed their community gardens completely. Alexandria kept the gardens open, but we had to post signs and we still encourage everybody. Social distancing is in effect. And when you are in proximity to others that are not inside your family, then we want you to wear masks. The good thing about community gardening is it's all outdoors. Our plots are fairly spacious, that we aren't close to each other. So that's allowed us to have the gardens and to operate as we have. They actually just today, the governor announced a change on the restrictions of the numbers of people that can congregate both indoors and outdoors. And so the rules are changing, but previously to today, it was no more than 25. So that outdoors. So that was why we had to stick with this Zoom session for this meeting, and then our spring social. But maybe later in the summer, we have another event in August. We typically do, and we may be able to hold that outside. We'll see how it goes. So I do, one other thing is that we are going to we decided to open the tool shed starting April 1st. That shed has been closed, which is where we have tools for gardeners to use because we didn't want to spread germs with using the tools. But we've decided to go ahead and open that this spring here next week. And we're going to post the rules about using the shed, that only one person can be in there at a time. Anybody in and around and using the shed and going inside needs to wear a mask. And we're going to ask you to wipe down the tools with disinfectant wipes that we have in the shed when you're using the tools before and after your use. So that is a change that we are going to make. There may be some other things that we can do later this spring, summer, but I did just want to remind everybody that, and the signs are posted, COVID's still in effect. We are under the jurisdiction of the city and how we respond to COVID as using the garden as part of the outdoor park. And so that, we have to pay attention to that, and you'll hear from us if there's any further restrictions or if things get worse. But hopefully, as we get the vaccines and all of us are getting vaccinated, things will get better as we move into the spring and the summer. So I just want to, so that takes one issue that I just wanted to bring to your attention. And I think, Elizabeth, I'll turn it back to you for the next part of the program.
One thing I wanted to mention about the shed, we will send out, and I'll send out an email to everybody letting them know that the shed is reopened. It's a great resource particularly for new gardeners, so that you can go in there and use shovels and hand tools and not have to go to Home Depot or wherever and buy your own. The one thing about them is the tools, the large tools, the shovels, there are 3 push mowers, and there are hand tools. They're there for you to borrow. Please return them. Wipe them down, as Richard said, when you return them. The consumables, there are a number of consumable items in there. They are for common area stuff and picnics and things like that. So please don't take any of those. Just use the tool. The tools are yours to use. That we have some netting in there. We have some other things in there that we're using for other projects. Those are not available. So if it's not consumable, please don't use it.
Thank you. So next up in our program, we have Donna Lee, who is a master gardener who's going to very quickly run through some of the resources that the Master Gardeners of Northern Virginia and the Virginia Extension Service offer, which are excellent. And I highly recommend you use all of these resources. They will teach you lots of things. So I will turn it over.
Can everybody see that?
Yep, that looks good.
Yep,
That's
that's
Yep, I
great.
can see it.
That's great. Thank you.
Okay, so I've been at Chinquapin for, I think this is my 4th or 5th year, I forget. But I was there at one time before co-gardening with a friend, and then was away for a couple of years. So I'm in M6 next to Ann. There's my email in case somebody wants to get a hold of me after this, but I'm going to give you some other resources from Master Gardeners. So we are sponsored, we're a group of volunteers sponsored by the Virginia Cooperative Extension, and the Virginia Cooperative Extension is the public urban ag arm of Virginia Tech, like their their Department of Agriculture and Virginia State University. And so it goes back to the 1800s, and the whole idea was to get research originally to the farmers to do better farming and all. And then over the last, I guess it's 35 years, at least for us, they're using, they have offices in many of the cities across the state where they can provide resources to their local community. And so ours is a combination, Arlington and Alexandria, and our office is actually located at Fairlington, but it's closed right now. And when it opens, you'll be able to actually go in there in person. But we have a help desk, and so we provide support via email from the help desk. So if you had a question about, I found this bug, I tried to research it, I don't know what it is, or I have this problem with my plant, and you can take a picture and email them a picture and write a description, and provide your information, and they'll do research for you or help you understand. It doesn't have to be just about bugs or weeds or diseases. It could be other kinds of questions. We also run a series of plant clinics and hope we will this year at numerous farmers markets. Like I staff the one regularly during the summer at Old Town. So we'll see what happens with that. Because of COVID, we've gotten really good at doing virtual classes. We've been doing classes for many years, but they were always in person at either one of the libraries or one of the rec centers. And we moved to virtual in April last year, and we went from maybe 30, 40 people in a class to sometimes we have 200-300 people calling in, and they're not even all from Virginia. So it's been very interesting. I'll show you some information on that in a minute. We also have a demonstration garden, and that picture here is from the Potomac Overlook Organic Vegetable Garden. It's in Arlington. It is open. You can go there to see things. This lower plot here is one of their square foot garden demonstrations. It's a great place to go, and it's a beautiful park, by the way. So you can head there and go see that. We have some other gardens, and they're on our website. So our website is mgnv.org. We like to tell people when you search, please use site.edu, site:/edu or site:/gov, because that way you get trusted sources versus just, my mother or something. I'm just going to give this to you really quickly because you may not know this, but we're in zone 7AB. We are coming up on the last killing frost, hopefully the beginning of April, although I'll tell you that we got a frost last year in May. It got down to 32, and some people that had already put in some of their warm weather crops, some of them lost them or they were damaged. So you have to kind of keep an eye on that. Our last killing frost is beginning of November. So we have a really long growing season, which is fantastic. We get pretty good amount of rain, sometimes too much. Sometimes we have drought spells in the middle of the summer. And so you have to kind of keep an eye on the rain. And you sort of start to become really interested in the rain when you have a garden and the weather in general. And we have clay soils. And I know that Elizabeth's going to talk about our soils. You can test your soil. Here's a soil kit. I think there are some in the shed, and I can provide more if folks want to test their soil. There's a form that goes with this, and the back of the form provides information on how to actually put together a soil sample. What we have found in our gardens, maybe because of the construction and because there were homes there, is that our soils tend to be a little alkaline. So instead of being under 7, they're over 7. And that's not really so great for most vegetable plants. You can definitely grow things, but it's just not as optimum. And it means the plants can't like draw up all of the nutrients that they would want to get out of the soil. So you can do this. You can mail it into Virginia Tech. The top cost is $16 if you have them test for everything. And they'll email you back your results in about 2 weeks. And so there's a form like this, that's the box, and I'll have some and I'll make sure there's some in the shed, but here's some other locations you can actually get you can get this box in the form. I actually put my dirt in this box, and I pour it into a baggie, and I flatten the box, but fill it out, and I put it in a mailing envelope because it's kind of hard to mail this little tiny box, I think, but I send it to them that way. So folks, seeds cost money, anywhere from $2 to $4 or $5 a packet. If you go to this URL, and I think Elizabeth's going to send out all these slides, you can actually get free seeds. I think you can ask for up to 5 of different kinds. And they're still giving out seeds when they run out of something in a certain, of a certain vegetable or flower or herb, then they may be out. But we had I think 15,000 packets of seeds when we started in February. So, and the brand, a lot of them are Lake Valley, but we have a new company called Heart that we got seeds. So a lot of them are from last year or the year before. They're still fine seeds to use. You may want to plant them a little bit more densely, but they're great. So this is the planting calendar that the Master Gardeners put together before my time with Master Gardeners. And it's just a really handy little reference. And as Ann said, this is posted on the back of the bulletin board at that link at the bottom. You can get your own copy of it. It's kind of a handy thing to just have. But what's interesting right now is, well, here's all these things up here that you can start to plant in March. If it has a little asterisk next to it, the suggestion is that you really need to plant a transplant. So cabbage can go in now, but it should go in as a plant, which you could get from a local nursery. Here's a nominal schedule for things in Zone 7 and sort of what typically people do every month. This information is on the back of that purple and green graph. Virtual resources. If you subscribe to the Between the Rows, you'll get something every month that tells you about here's the things that you do this month for gardening. We have these virtual classes. I taught a class on vegetable gardening for beginners just in March, the 5th and the 12th of March. And that should be available in the virtual classroom. It was 2 90-minute classes, but you could just, look at it and sort of jump to some things. But we sort of covered everything from, finding your spot, which you all have a spot, to looking at your soil, preparing it, to deciding what to grow, to planning what you're going to grow, and planting it and harvesting it and watering it and weeding it and looking out for bugs and disease. So we try to cover everything. Kitchen gardening is one page that has a ton of different resources on it that sort of go in depth into some of the things that were covered in that training. And then Prince William County, which also has a cooperative extension and their own master gardeners, has a course that you can sign up for that's a as-you-go course that's even in more depth than our course. So that's a free resource down there, that last link. So the course goes over, best practices. We recommend people test their soil. Basic thing is make sure you put the right plant in the right place. If you had a shady spot, trying to grow tomatoes there, they're not going to be as successful, for example, or peppers. We recommend companion planting. We recommend planting flowers. You'll see a lot of flowers. Our gardeners plant a lot of flowers. And start to learn what your insects are that are the good ones and the bad ones. I think the percentage is 90% of insects are actually friends, but there are 10 or so that are really a pain in our gardens. And Anne's going to talk about that. Elizabeth's going to talk about that. And if you can rotate crops, some people do this, some people don't. It's kind of hard in a 20 by 20 foot garden, but they recommend that not planting the same thing in the same spot every year, because disease can build up, pests can build up in that spot, and those plants are going to deplete the soil of some of the nutrients that they need. And so it's better to, at the very least, replace the nutrients that were depleted if your plant that you had, your vegetable that you had there was a heavy feeder. And I'm going to leave it, let's stop here, Elizabeth, because you're going to go to this next stuff, right?
Yep, I got that stuff. Thank you guys so much. I highly recommend, as Donna mentioned, the Between the Rows newsletter from the Master Gardeners is excellent. It gives you tips of what to do every month. So it's really helpful to kind of keep you on schedule with what you need to do. And just all of those resources, and especially the webinars y'all have been doing, amazing. So thank you for all that work, Donna. I know that's been a lot of work in converting this year, but it's really useful to have that online. So in this next few minutes, I just wanted to give you guys some, so I've been in the garden for 5 years. Before that, I actually had a plot in Arlington at the 4 Mile Run Garden. So we just wanted to give you really quickly some tips and pointers, things we've figured out over the years to help you get started off on the right foot. The biggest thing you can do to make your garden better is have good soil. Some of you who have gotten plots this year hopefully already have really excellent soil. I'm in plot 03. Whoever had it before me had done a great job. I had excellent soil, but every year I still amend it. You still need to keep that soil in good shape to have really good, healthy plants. So we get deliveries from a company called Earth Group Compost. He usually delivers twice a year. I think we're gonna try to set up a spring compost delivery. It is, I think, $60 for about 5 wheelbarrows of excellent compost. It is way cheaper and better quality than going to Home Depot or Merrifield and buying a bunch of bags. So I highly recommend that. We are on clay soil, as Donna mentioned, and you can use, there's a product called garden gypsum, which helps break up the soil. You don't want to put too much of it in your garden because it messes with your calcium and alkaline rates, but it's good. So all of a lot of soil prep information is on the kiosk by the shed. So, and if you have questions about this, find one of your garden neighbors, talk to each other. You know, a lot of us have been out there a few years and we have some good ideas. The other biggest thing is what's on the screen. These are our common weeds, and Donna put the slide together. I was out Sunday, and hairy bittercress is starting to take over. It seeds like the devil, and it is adorable little white flowers, but it will seed and go everywhere. And you really have to get on top of these weeds before they'll take over your entire plot. So the biggest thing about the weeds is don't just, you know, hoe them over. You really have to pull them out from the roots, get all of it, get as much as you can. We do have some thistles. So I grabbed a thistle once and I will never do it again because it hurts very, very much. You know, and some of the Bermuda and other grasses creep along the paths. So as Ann mentioned, especially with the monitoring, keep your paths clean and clear. And you really have to get down and dig out that Bermuda grass because it will go everywhere and creep into your paths. So dig the roots out as much as you can of all the weeds and really work on amending the soil when possible and as needed. I get a load of compost every year and just top off the garden because it really helps feed your plants. So we are on organic garden, so you can't use Roundup. You can't use anything that's not organic. So organic feed, fertilizers are great. The next slide, Donna, can you flip to the next slide, is the common bugs and pests. So neem oil, NEEM oil, is an organic oil that you can spray that helps control aphids and sort of helps control some of these bugs. It's not going to get everything, but it's really helpful. I had a horrible squash bug infestation last year and they killed all my zucchini plants. And, you know, some years that happens. Some years it's fine. It really does just vary from year to year. Cucumbers generally get attacked by the cucumber beetle. So you can give it a try. It might work, it might not. And every year is a little different. Some years we have lots of tomatoes and a wonderful tomato crop. Last year, mine didn't do great, but someone's a few plots over did really well. So the important thing to remember is keep trying things. You know, don't get discouraged. Gardening is a process. It's a learning process for all of us. I mean, I've been doing it since college and I'm still learning a lot every single year. And we learn from each other and our neighbors and learn what works. So really, you know, talk to your garden neighbors and meet them. So in the agenda that we emailed y'all, we mentioned Earth Brew, but also Green Street is the closest garden center to the gardens. There's some other independent garden centers around as well. I love Knowles Produce out in Springfield. There's also Merrifield, a lot of little places around. So I'm going to open it up. Does anyone on the board have any other important tips that they want to share really quickly before we kind of round out and start taking questions?
Yeah, I just want a couple of things I wanted to mention on, I know most of the gardeners, sometimes you inherit a good plot, like Elizabeth said, but most of us, you get a plot that needs a lot of work. So that's all of us have gone through that process, and trust me, you get through it, and then things get better, and every year gets better when you keep working on your plot. When you do clear out your plot, want to make sure that that people put you can put your weeds in the yard waste bin, in the green bins, but you really need to shake the soil off of those weeds before you put them in the bin. The city actually uses those bins and takes that away to be composted. And so they can't make compost out of soil. They make compost out of plants that have been out of plants. And so it's important for us to not put trash in those green bins or a lot of soil or rocks or anything like that. Just discard your weeds that you pulled up by the roots. And that's what goes in the green bins. The black trash bins are for like bags of empty bags of things that you bought, or coffee cups and anything you're throwing away. We do not want rocks in the trash bag bins. We actually have a rock pile by the mulch down by the lower garden, behind the mulch bins in the lower garden. Large sections of wood or anything big needs to go at the lower garden behind. There's a fenced area behind the mulch bins in the lower garden. So just wanted to remind you about those. And then lastly, also a lot of people that have a new plot may want to put up a fence. The fence rules, we actually in the process of getting our fence rules a little bit more tightened up. We don't like any orange or construction fencing. We prefer either the sturdy black plastic, or you could use the wire with regular garden fence posts. Anything that you put in the garden, wood or fence, has to be removable. These garden plots are, again, we are renting these garden plots from the city. And when you leave, somebody else comes in, and so we don't have anything permanent, either in fencing or in trellises or anything you build in your plots. Just wanted to mention those a couple of those things for anybody that has a new plot. So that's thank you, Elizabeth. Back to you.
Yeah, and two other things. There's leaf mulch and wood chips. There's at the top of the garden and the bottom of the garden, there's 2 bins of each. Those are for everyone's use. The wood chips, are great for to keep the weeds out of your pathways. And if you want to make small pathways within your plot, that's great. The leaf mulch is great for mulching. It is kind of hot sometimes and can burn up your plants if you put too much on. So I would use it sparingly, but it's great to use if you mix it into your soil, especially. It does help amend things. So all of that is for your use. We had a question in the chat about when the compost may be delivered, and I'm not sure, but we will figure that out when Earth Brew can deliver, and we'll get something set up. And we also had a question about how often the city empties the trash and yard waste bins, and I think it's weekly, right?
Yes, it's they're supposed to do it on Fridays. They don't always hit it like they did last week.
Yeah.
But they did get the yard waste finally picked up on Monday, so we sometimes have to jog them. One thing I wanted to mention having to do with yard waste and weeds, because we've seen this happen. We saw this just the other day. When you're digging the weeds out of your plots, do whatever you can to knock the soil off the roots before you throw it in the bins. If the bins are full of soil, the city will not empty them. And when that happens, your fellow gardeners have to go in there and dump them out and knock off the dirt and put the weeds back in the bins. So please do whatever you can to knock that soil off.
And also,
you're gonna get all of it off, but you'll get most of it off.
That's your soil you're throwing in the trash can. So you want to keep it in your plot. So I take my hori knife when I dig the weed out and just whack the bottom of it, and all the dirt usually falls off. So it's tedious. Gardening is time consuming, but if you do it the right way, you'll develop the method.
One thing on the Earth Brew compost, they deliver usually in mid-April and again in around November. And one of our board members, Brad, coordinates that with the Earth Brew guy. And so when that becomes available, he will let me know, and I'll send an email out to everybody. He brings it out in a big truck, he dumps a load of it, and he takes wheelbarrow by wheelbarrow, depending on what you ordered, and he will deliver it actually to your site, to your plot rather. So I'll let you know when that's it, but it's usually, the next delivery is probably going to be around mid-April.
Elizabeth,
Um,
can I throw in one comment?
Please, go for it.
So hoses usually belong to gardeners, and usually what we do is we bring hoses out and we just leave them out there for the season, for anyone to use. But typically people bring their own nozzles. So just keep a nozzle like in the trunk of your car or at the back of your bike, and then hook that up to the hose that's there, but leave the hose then when you leave. And also, I'm on the end near the access road, and please just don't back up into the spigots that are there, because we have to shut off all the water, call the city, have the spigot repaired, and we do have to pay for that. And then it either cuts off the water supply for everybody or floods somebody's plot. So please, if you're going to use that access road, and you need to turn around, go all the way to the end, turn around and then come back instead of trying to 18-point turn in the access road, or just don't park on the loop instead, and that'll keep our spigots in good shape.
Actually, the city has now put up no parking signs on the side of the road by the spigots for that very.
Yes, yes. Although I do occasionally still see
Yeah,
people try to turn around. Yeah.
We have one reminder from obviously a current gardener that you can put up fencing, 6-foot fencing, but it needs to be inside the perimeter of your plot, not in your walkway. And the fencing needs to not fall over and obstruct the walkway. So please be really aware when you're putting up fencing, especially to try to keep the deer out, to make it really taut and really good quality. And we do have another question about tomato pest. What are the worst pests for tomatoes? Hornworms that gardeners have experienced, and what organic control works best? So my biggest problem with tomatoes is not so much pest as it's tomato blight. So I don't know if anyone else has other tomato thoughts.
I think that's usually one of the main things. A number of us try to use, using straw to keep the water from splashing up from the soil on the tomato plants. I know that's supposed to be, you don't want to try not to water in the evening and have them get damp at night. You really want them better water in the morning if you can, but when you water, try not to splash the soil up on the tomatoes, as I understand. Donna can tell us more about that probably, but I know that's supposed to be.
I think to that question, we haven't had really a problem with insects or anything, hornworms or anything like that. It's usually blight, that kind of thing. And if you put a good layer of mulch down, and the other important thing now is to water down into the root. Don't sprinkle the entire plant. The leaves don't need the water. The roots need the water. So lay your hose down and let it give it a good soaking. That's the best thing you can do. And it also, deters any kind of pathogens coming up from the soil and hitting the plants.
Let me just say on watering, one of the worst things that you can do is water lightly often. I see people out there with a hose and they're spraying. Really what you want to do, you want plants to get about 1 inch of water a week, and they need to be watered deeply because you want to encourage the roots to go down. And so that whole thing of spraying is kind of useless. The water evaporates off the plants and it doesn't get down to the roots. My favorite kind of nozzle, and you have to look for these, is you have these nozzles where they have a rotating adjustable head. And if you get one that's got a soaker option on it, that is the best, because you can put it in the soaker option. You can weed, you can do whatever you're going to do, and you can leave the hose on low on the soaker mode at the root of, like, say, your tomato plant or your pepper plant, and leave it there for a few minutes so it really soaks down where you need it, and then move it to the next spot. You definitely don't want to. I see people do it all the time. I used to have a garden at another place, and my neighbor would water for me, and she would spray through my fence over everything, and I'd be like, oh God, please don't do that. You're not helping me. But that's the thing. And then just keep an eye on the weather. Get a rain gauge for less than $10. I think $4 online. Get yourself a rain gauge so you know when how much water we've had. Because you'll get there some days, you'll be like, we got 3 inches of water. And it may look dry on the surface, but we got plenty of water and there's no need water.
Sprinklers are not effective.
Yeah.
Occasionally, somebody will hook up a sprinkler, turn it on, leave, and then forget about it. And next thing you know, you're flooding a neighbor, and it's just not good for your garden either.
Right. For the bean beetle, I do use neem on it, but what I found last year was if you cover them early with some kind of row cover, beans are self-pollinators. They don't need bugs to pollinate. So you can cover them and keep them covered except when you're gonna harvest them, and that helps keep the bugs off. But if you really get at it early, and I use my fingers a lot and just pull the beetles off, and big thing is to look for little eggs underneath the leaves. And if you find eggs on a leaf, take that whole leaf off and throw it in the trash, not in the yard waste, because you're just going to put bugs in the yard waste, and they may not get killed when they make the compost. But look for the little eggs. If you're not, I think in my briefing, if you look at the briefing, some of the following pages show you the different stages of the insects and show you what the little eggs look like. They're tiny, but there'll be like 50 of them all together underneath the leaf. And if you get that, same with squash bugs, you can get those out, and squash borers, if you can get those eggs, it makes a big difference. So you got to kind of look at your stuff.
You can actually, the thing that I found very effective is to buy tulle, which is wedding cloth, like they make veils out of. It's very light, it's very, very fine. And drape that over your bush beans and tack it all the way around with rocks or whatever, all the way around so the beetles can't get in. And as Donna said, it's self-pollinating. So you can leave them on there for the entire season and pick your beans and you won't have any problem with bugs. You can't do that with every plant. Some plants are not self-pollinating, like cucumbers. You've got to, once they flower, you've got to take your covering off so that the pollinators can get to them.
Right. And the other question on compost, you don't need to dig it way deep. You just want to you can lay a couple inches on the top of the surface. You can kind of dig it under lightly. I'm not a big fan of deep digging. Once you get your plot straightened out and you get rid of your weeds, the biggest thing you can do then is cover any bare soil. Mulch is great. The only thing, what Elizabeth was saying is you don't want to mulch right up against the stem of your plant because it could burn it. So you want to mulch close to the plant, but not right on top of it. You don't want to put like a whole mound of mulch at the root of your plant. Compost is fine though. Leaf mulch is really good. If you have any, once you guys get your weeds out of your plot and you figure out where your beds are going to be and all, you want to, wherever you plant, great. You want to use some kind of mulch or straw or something. It'll help keep the seeds from germinating, because weed seeds are they'll stay alive a century. You uncover a weed seed that's 100 years old, and you know what? It's going to grow. It's amazing.
And I'll say this. So I got my plot in 2017, and it's great. It has a trellis in it, and I went out and it was covered in weeds, and I thought, and I got someone to come and till it for me. And it was the worst decision I've ever made, because when they tilled it 2 feet, I mean, big, giant, great. But then so I got rid of all those weeds, and then all the other weeds came up. Like Donna said, they were down in the soil. And that's when I started to get really weird thistles and all the stuff that I've now been digging out for 3 years. But now I've been there for 3 years. I've got the weeds under control. You can do it. It just takes tenacity, and just, you got to keep at it. And, I cover part of the plot with, in the winter with weed block or a tarp or a lot of mulch, something. It really does keep the weeds. Straw is great. It really helps. But we've had a lot of questions about how deep to dig in your compost. And once your soil is good and you have everything going, you can really just put a layer on top, like Donna was saying, dig in a little bit. We do have another question. So Ann, this is about your old plot, K19.
I've already
Okay.
Yeah, there were 2 fig trees in there, and the city removed them. They ground the stump, so there's no stump in there. There may be some little tiny roots in there, but those are going to die off, so it's not going to be an issue.
Yeah.
And one thing I wanted to mention about tilling, because there are pros and cons to it. There are some people who like to have their plots tilled every year, and I'm not a fan of tilling for a number of reasons. It ends up compacting the soil, because all of those lovely worms that were digging all those nice tunnels and creating all that great, um, loosening up the soil, you're cutting them up. Also, the other thing is that any weeds you had in there, and you have weed seeds, you stir them up, and once they get to the surface, they will be full-grown weeds. So, and it ends up compacting the soil. Sometimes if you inherit a very bad plot that is full of Bermuda grass or wiregrass, you may have no choice but to get in there and till, just so you can get in there and dig those roots out. That is the worst weed we have. You got to get all those out. Once you get them out, I would never till again. But there are other people who till all the time, but I don't think it's good for the soil.
Yeah, and I know I have pulled that wiregrass out by the roots in my paths. And then once you pull that out by the roots and then you put the chips down, really my paths are not as much of a problem anymore. But you really have to get those roots out, but then put the mulch down, and that really seems to control the wiregrass on your paths adjacent to your plot.
Yeah, I agree. If you can, the best thing to do with your paths, and you need your neighbors, you need to work with your garden neighbor on this, is to dig out all the weeds, and then put down a good thick layer of newspaper or cardboard. And then on top of that, use garden weed block cloth. Don't use plastic, because plastic is slippery. But then on top of the weed black cloth, put down wood chips. And I'm telling you, it works. I mean, I share a plot with Donna. We have no weeds in that path. I don't want to go out there and be weeding paths all the time, or even weeding my plot for that matter, but certainly not weeding the paths. And that really seems to be a good solution, and keeps those weeds from the paths getting into your plots.
Yeah. We do have another question about animals in the garden. So obviously we have deer, which have been mentioned. The question from Jessica is, she may have had a rodent overwintering in her garden in the unused plot, which I'm guessing might have been a chipmunk. Any advice on repelling these from an active garden? I'll say we used to have a garden cat, which I think sadly passed away. And last year I saw so many more chipmunks because the cat was not around. And they would nibble my acorn squash and my plants. So I don't think there's any way to really deal with them. I don't know if anyone has thoughts.
I know I harvested my tomatoes when they were green, often to try to keep the chipmunks from, because they'll come up and they'll eat a little bit of your tomato and ruin it. So the only way, but they ripen it in your kitchen at home. So you put them on your windowsill and at home. So that was one way, but I'm not sure we've got an effective way to deal with the chipmunks. We seem to have some. I don't know, not that many squirrels, but maybe some squirrels as well.
The cat who used to frequent the gardens frequently, I think really did help keep the little ones away. And somebody said a petition to replace the garden cat. Well, yeah. Somebody has to own the cat. The cat belonged to one of the houses on the other side of the fence next to our gardens.
Yeah, maybe we can talk to the neighbors and convince them to get some more cats.
I would like to have a garden dog to help keep away the deer, but I don't know, that's difficult. But if you are out there, really no dogs are allowed in the garden for obvious reasons. But if you do bring your dog on a leash, and if you see a deer, well, let him off the leash and have him chase them away.
And the cat actually, by the way, she would attack dogs. And I saw her do that. If a dog was loose, she'd run after him and attack him. So
she was
we met her.
feisty.
She was. One thing I wanted to mention, you mentioned dogs. Sometimes you will see people coming through the gardens with dogs. They're not really supposed to have dogs inside the garden area. If they want to use that one road that's down by the shed going down into the woods, that's fine, as long as the dog's on a leash. And sometimes people will let their dogs run loose, and then they are causing damage in our gardens. And you know, you just have to remind people, there are signs there that say dogs are prohibited. So just point to the signs and say, hey, please don't let your dog in the garden. The other thing we have is, we talked about deer and critters, four-footed critters stealing crops. We have an issue with two-footed people stealing crops. We had a lot of that this past season. And that's tough because nobody really wants to accost anybody and accuse them. Just be aware, if the more you know about your garden neighbors and who might be coming out to fill in for them while they're on vacation or whatever, the more you'll know whether they belong there or not. If they're out there in the garden and they're doing some weeding or they're watering, and then they're also picking, they're probably doing it for a friend. But we've had situations in which people have just come through with a grocery bag and just cherry pick, just like a farmer's market. And you know, you have to remind them, because there are signs again that prohibit them from taking our stuff. They're stealing from us. So it's tough. But if you see them, just, you know, sometimes I've run into people and ask them, you know, which plot is yours? If they don't know a plot number, they probably don't belong. And remind them. And if I'm wrong, I don't mind apologizing and explain to them we have a huge problem here with theft, and we do. So, you know, do whatever you can to discourage people. You can call the police. The problem is, by the time they get there, those people are gone. But, you know, it's a problem with them stealing from us.
Yeah, and as an add-on to that, if you use the shed, remember to lock the shed, because there's expensive lawnmowers, tillers, equipment in there. So if you're using it, make sure you lock it at the end of the day.
And if you have any, just email myself or Ann, just email one of us if you have any problem, and I can go up there and help you or something. I'm not very far away. I did want to, Elizabeth, you mentioned when we talked about this previously about what works well, and we're about to wrap up, I know, but I know I just planted my lettuce this week. Lettuce, I know I've always had good success with. I've had good success with tomatoes and peppers. My cucumbers sometimes have been okay, but sometimes they haven't. But I know some of the early stuff, a lot of folks are putting in now broccoli, cauliflower, kale, lettuce, radishes, and quite a few of those do quite well at the garden.
Yeah, beets, turnips, rutabaga, root vegetables, and all that stuff can go in now from seed. I planted turnips one year and had, I mean, I don't even like turnips. I had 100 turnips. I had to give them all to my neighbor. So yeah, there's a lot of good stuff you can actually plant now. And then your warm weather crops will go in early mid-May for the summer. But yeah, tomatoes generally do pretty well. Last year I had luck with acorn and butternut squash, but not squash and zucchini, summer squash and zucchini.
One thing I want to mention about tomatoes, because you will pretty soon you will see all kinds of tomato plants in the big box stores, and you think, okay, fine, I can go in and plant them. And I think it was Donna's earlier mentioned, we had a freeze late April, early May last year. A lot of people lost their tomatoes. It does you no good to plant your tomatoes before the beginning or middle of May. The soil is not warm enough. I checked mine yesterday and it was only 50 degrees. That's not warm enough for tomatoes or peppers. And so they are not going to get, they're going to just be stunted. So just resist buying any of that stuff for planting it until at least Mother's Day. I usually go by Mother's Day.
Mother's Day is a good day, and you're correct. They have them. They already have the tomatoes at I saw those at Home Depot this weekend. So Do not buy those.
One of the gardeners mentioned, and I know where her plot is, it's all the way down there in the corner, and it's not far from the bench, asking if we can have more no smoking signs. Richard.
Yeah, I just put no smoking signs up today at both the bench area in the north part of the garden and also the one at our perennial beds. So we did that, and if those don't work, then we'll get some bigger. I've been bigger signs. I've been sort of resistant to get some ugly signs, but anyway, I just did that today. And there's also a question about the combo lock for the shed. We will send that out in a separate email. So that'll be coming out to you just very, very soon. And that'll be open April 1st. We're aiming for next week for that to open.
So we're almost out of time. I just want to throw in one plug for the fundraiser that we're having this week. So on Thursday, 2 days from now, we are having a donate back night at Lena's Wood Fire Pizza on the corner of Mount Vernon and Braddock, right next to the Braddock Metro Station. 10% of all food and beverage sales will come back to the garden, and that money will be used for our petty expense fund. And you can get lunch or dinner all day long. Tell your friends, tell your neighbors, tell your coworkers. You don't have to be a gardener. You just have to mention us, the Chinquapin Organic Gardens, and then the person processing your payment will make sure that we get 10% of that.
You can also, at any time, you can donate directly to the gardens, and we can provide that information for you. As Elizabeth set up a site, that anybody can contribute any money they want. So, and we're in pretty good shape right now, but we always need to repair lawnmowers and replace things and things like that. So, in a few bucks helps.
We also have a website for getting hats and t-shirts with Chinquapin Gardens on them. It's called Cafe Press. I think, Anne, I can't remember what that was I know it's on the website, I think.
Yeah, if you go on the Chinquapingardens.org website, all of that information is on there.
And we get a portion, a portion of that. Anything you buy, we get a little bit for the garden. And as Anne mentioned, we use that for our maintenance of our equipment and other expenses that we have in trying to manage the garden area.
Well,
Did we cover all the questions?
I think we've covered all the questions. We have a question about linking us to an Amazon Smile account, and that's a great idea. I'll check into that and see if we can maybe do that. The fundraiser is this Thursday, so 2 days from now. Those were the last two questions. So if no one has any more questions, I guess we'll wrap it up. And I just want to say thank you to everyone. Thanks especially to Donna for her slides. She sent me that in a PDF, so I will send it to Anne so we can send it around. So that way you'll have all that information. I've had that planting grid on my refrigerator for 4 years and I can't live without it. It's a great resource. So definitely, we are a community garden and we're here to help each other and to grow great vegetables and flowers. So please, if you need things, get in touch with some of the board members. That's why we're here. And meet your garden neighbors, because it'll be useful when you go on vacation and you need someone to water.
We also, I also posted the common weeds and the bugs slide that Elizabeth was showing. They're on the backside of the bulletin board kiosk next to the shed. So if you're down there working in your garden, you say, oh, what's that pretty blue or pretty white flower? And you go up there and look, and there it is. And it's a weed. And same thing with the bugs. And then also the planting chart is up there too. If you just need to refer to that, if you don't happen to have it with you. So.
Yep. Well, I think we're done. And, email us if you have questions in the future. We're all here to help. So welcome to the gardens, and we're super glad to have so many new gardeners.
And hope we have a fabulous year.
Yes.
We see you
Better
all
than
at the
last
garden.
year.
Yep.
Thanks,
Thank you.
guys.
See you at the gardens.
Thanks, everyone.